Welcome back to another Small Bore and More. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that the Blue 2022 Monkey is just back from a very successful day at DynoJet UK. And if you haven't seen that video, there's a link in the description below. It's a good one. Anyway, with all the bike's extra power, we've got to be able to stop it. So we're turning to Brembo to take the stock Honda brakes to the next level. And we've decided to go with a P4 on the front and a P34 on the rear. Now, the rear can be pretty straightforward. However, of course, we're not taking the easy route. We're going to be using a different style bracket that mounts the caliper in an underslung position. Why? Because I think it looks class, like a mini superbike, but it also makes getting the rear wheel in and out a bit easier. And obviously, the caliper's now in a totally different position. We're going to need a longer brake hose. So we'll be using the Hel Braided Lines, and I'll put links in the description so you can kind of track them down yourself online. The front's slightly more straightforward, although we'll be putting the Hel Braided hoses on that too. We're going to leave that for now until we swap them out for the RCS master cylinder. Now, before you say it in the comments, I know it's overkill. In fact, it's massive overkill. But who doesn't want some nice Brembo brakes on the bike? I know I do. These P4 calipers, they're normally used on much more powerful bikes, and the way they attach when you use them on the Monkey is slightly different to how they normally would. Now, you can get a few different styles and brands of adapter bracket. However, I think the Revolution one, the 220, is the neatest, but that neatness comes at a slight installation cost. You have to shape part of the caliper mounting surface, at least I did on this one, and it's not a particularly hard job. 2 minutes with a file, but if that's something that you don't fancy doing, then there are other brackets out there that are a bit chunkier but just bolt straight on, and I'll put a link to those as well. Right, let's get the old calipers off and these Brembos on. They're going to look and perform next level. So if that's something you want to see, keep watching. Oh, and if you're not already subscribed, do me a favour, subscribe. Gets me numbers up. So the way these calipers fit on a standard bike is to this surface here. If you flip it over, the rear of the caliper doesn't actually come into contact with anything. So normally the shape of the edges of these mounting lugs doesn't really matter. However, when you use the Revolution bracket, any additional material on the edge that wouldn't have mattered before can now hold the bracket from sitting perfectly square. That said, the excess material needs to be removed. You can see those little pencil lines that I've drawn on the mounting tabs to highlight where the tabs are holding the bracket off, and I guess also as a guide so I don't remove any more material that will be visible when the bracket's in place. Like I say, there's other brackets you can get that don't require this, but one, they're not black, and I think the black matches in with the fork bottoms, and two, they're a bit chunkier. But if you know of any other brackets that are black and don't require these mods, then help people out by leaving a link in the comments. But for now, this is the route I'm going down. Okay, so with those two areas dressed with a file, let's get the old calipers off and the new ones on. When you loosen the banjo bolt, make sure you don't get brake fluid on any painted surfaces. Then unscrew the two 8mm bolts that hold the ABS line and the ABS sensor. Then it's a 12mm socket to remove the two bolts to hold the caliper on. So like most of our videos, we'll get a weight of before and after, and I had a suspicion that with this being a bigger caliper, we're not going to get a weight saving. So the OEM is 744 grams. And the P4 with the bracket, and I guess we also need the two bolts that join the two together because that's part of the weight. That's coming in around 1004 grams, so 1 kilo. So we're going up sort of 260 grams, which isn't a lot, but it is unsprung weight. but I guess putting any larger caliper on is going to be a bit of a weight increase. One thing to note with these calipers is they are so tight to the wheel, and you can't actually get the caliper into position with the brake pads in. So we just need to remove the brake pads, mount the caliper, and then refit the brake pads. Removing the pads from this caliper is really easy. Just push the retaining pin through, remove the spring bracket and lift the pads out. Attach the bracket to the caliper using the bolts supplied in the kit plus a bit of thread lock. Then fix that in place with the OEM caliper bolts. So with the bracket fitted and the caliper bolts tightened, we'll give you the torque specs later. You can see just how tight this caliper is to the wheel. It's almost made to measure. So let's get it plumbed back up using a standard brake line. And like I said, we'll be putting braided lines on this bike, so that'll be a future video when we fit the master cylinder. We just need to reattach the ABS bracket and the ABS sensor. And to be fair, I could have probably got away without moving the ABS line. It's only 2 bolts to put back on. I'm going 30 Newton meters for the banjo. I think the book says 34 Newton meters, but lots of people just tighten them by hand, and if they leak, tighten them a bit more. And I'm going to go 30 for the caliper bolts. Now, the workshop manual actually says pre-coated bolts replace with a new one, but I'm reusing the existing ones with a new coat and a thread lock, so you do whatever you think's best. Well, that looks amazing. You just need to get some brake fluid and get it bled up. So bleed nipple dust cover off, connect my little bottle for catching the fluid and just crack the bleed nipple open. It's 11mm spanner. Let's get the reservoir top off. I'm using Motul 700, overkill again, but if it's good enough for the Fireblade, it's good enough for the Monkey. And with this being the new caliper, we need to load it with fluid. Once it's flowing out of the caliper with no more air bubbles, then it's just the standard bleeding process. So I'll disconnect the bottle. I'm using 10 Newton meters for the nipple. Then make sure the fluid's at the top mark and replace the reservoir top. Right, let's get onto the rear. So when changing the rear wheel, I like to use a small bottle jack and raise the bike so the rear wheel's just a no more off the ground. It just makes lining everything up and putting it back in so much easier. Axle nut off. Look at how easy that slides out. Chain off. Caliper up and just roll the wheel back. Okay, so 14mm to disconnect the rear master cylinder banjo. And then just lift the whole caliper bracket and brake line off. There's a bit of weight to this, so let's get on the scale, see if we can offset that weight gain from the front. So the OEM is just under 1.3 kilos, 1,293 grams. So the new caliper with everything it needs is just under a kilo at 995, so that's 298 grams lighter. And it was a 260 gram increase on the front, so we're actually saving 38 grams there with this setup overall, so that's pretty good. Plus, while we have the wheel out, we'll be swapping out the spacers for the Kitako ones. That's another 86 gram saving. All adds up. Right, let's get the bracket in place and we'll roll the wheel in. Chain on. and because it's at the correct height, it just needs lined up front to back. And with a bit of a wiggle, we're in. Caliper on with the supplied bolts, a bit of thread lock, and I'll torque them all up in a minute when I'm happy everything's right. Hel Braided line on, caliper end with a couple of new copper washers. I'm going to have to remove the side panel to get access. New washers, and get the line to where I think it needs to be, and then I'm talking to 30 Newton meters. Same for the caliper, I'm going to be talking to 30 Newton meters, and like I said before, I'm pretty sure the Brembo book says 34 Newton meters, but lots of people just tighten them by hand, and if they don't leak, great. If they do leak, tighten them a bit more. Caliper bolts again, I'm going to 30 Newton meters. In rear axle, I'm going to 59 Newton meters. Time to bleed the rear, which is the same process that we use with the front. Fluid bottle connected, bleed nipple opened, pump the fluid through, making sure you don't get too low in the reservoir, and keep going till there's no air bubbles. Then close the nipple and top the fluid to the correct level. Reattach the reservoir, and I'm nipping up again to 10 Newton meters for the bleed nipple. Okay, so that's the calipers on. It's looking as good as I expected. The lever feels a little softer, but I guess that's because the master cylinder is moving the same amount of fluid as always, but the bigger caliper needs more fluid to move the pistons inward. What do they perform like? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's get out on the bike. Okay, so I'm going to take it up to speed, then test the feel of the lever and what the power feels like. Don't take too much notice of the actual speed, because I don't need to dial in the speed on the Takagawa dash. There's a percentage correction needs to go in. So I'm going to give the lever a good squeeze and see if the ABS kicks in. Yep, ABS works fine. So that's good. Lever feels nice and positive. Get a nice sound off the caliper as well when the brake's on. I love this bike. one finger you can pull up, and ABS was kicking in there, so that's breaking the traction there with just one finger. So I'm really pleased with how that performs, how it feels. Well, first impressions are great, loads of power and loads of feel. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the RCS master cylinder going on with the Hel Braided Lines. So for now, that's all from Small Bore and More. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.